On New Year's Eve 2023 in Baltimore, most people are busy celebrating the countdown. But while the city parties, some folks are still working like it is any other night. One of them is Eleanor Falco, a rookie police officer. She is responding to a call from a cafe owner about a customer who has been sitting around for hours and refusing to leave. It sounds like a small, routine problem until something terrifying happens and the entire city is thrown into chaos. Right as the fireworks begin, dozens of people suddenly drop, killed by a mysterious sniper. Eleanor rushes to one of the shooting scenes inside an apartment building. The moment she arrives, she tries to prevent more deaths by shutting off the lights, making it harder for the shooter to see into the building. Over the hallway speakers, management warns residents to stay away from windows, turn off their unit lights, and not leave the building because the shooter is still out there, and it would be easier to pick people off as they run outside. Not long after, police begin working every scene, tracking the direction of the shots, and the results are chilling. All the victims were fired on from a single location, a unit inside the nearby Redwood apartments. Then before anyone can process it, an explosion suddenly rocks the Redwood building. A full police convoy immediately heads to Redwood, targeting the 17th floor. Eleanor asks her partner to record the crowd rushing out, because the explosion could be a distraction, and the shooter might be hiding among the evacuees. SWAT and firefighters are deployed to secure the scene and take the killer into custody. Eleanor, still determined to prove herself, follows them upstairs and enters the unit without any breathing equipment. Within moments, she collapses. At first, it feels like she is falling from the building, but it is only a hallucination. In reality, she is passed out from lack of oxygen. Eleanor is pulled back from the edge by an FBI agent named Jack McKenzie, along with a medic. As she regains consciousness, she notices another FBI agent, Jeffrey Lamarck, who has been assigned to lead the investigation. Police records show the apartment belongs to a Norwegian financial consultant who is currently in Oslo. The unit was acquired as debt repayment and has been sitting empty for a long time. Back downstairs, Eleanor is immediately reprimanded by her superior for rushing into the scene without breathing gear. Her reckless move forced medical staff to waste valuable time rescuing her on the 17th floor, time that could have been spent helping civilians. Later at the Baltimore Police Department, Jeffrey lays out the early findings. 29 people were killed, and not a single shot missed. Stranger still, there are no shell casings, no hair, and no fingerprints left behind at the scene. To Jeffrey, this does not look like terrorism, because terrorist attacks usually come with online claims of responsibility soon after. Instead, he believes this was done by one person, someone extremely careful and highly trained. And with no clear motive and no meaningful connection between the victims, it appears the shootings were random. That only makes it more disturbing. And somewhere out there, the shooter is still watching. Welcome to Catch a Killer. Then Jeffrey overhears Eleanor talking with a fellow officer. Eleanor describes the shooter like someone swatting a mosquito, casually taking lives with no hesitation and no guilt. Her perspective catches Jeffrey's attention. Intrigued by how she sees the case, Jeffrey approaches Eleanor and asks what she thinks is really driving the person behind the trigger. Eleanor tells Jeffrey that in her view, the shooter is not chasing ideology or revenge. He is chasing psychological satisfaction. She believes that sooner or later he will strike again because he enjoyed what he did. To her, the killings were not just acts of violence. They were a way for him to feel something. Still, she admits it is only a theory. So far, there is not a single solid clue pointing to the killer's identity. The next day, Jeffrey asks Eleanor to meet him at a cafe along with another FBI agent, Jack McKenzie. Before that meeting, Jeffrey has already reviewed Eleanor's personal file. He discovers that she has struggled with mental health issues in the past. Rather than seeing it as a weakness, he views it as an advantage. He believes Eleanor might understand the mindset of the shooter better than anyone else, especially if the killer is also mentally unstable. On top of that, her analytical instincts impress him. Jeffrey decides to bring both Eleanor and Jack onto his team to solve the Baltimore case. In his opinion, they are the only ones he can truly rely on. Eleanor is then reassigned, placing her within the same jurisdiction as the FBI's Boston office. Soon after, they attend a meeting with two other officials, Krupp and Marquand. Jack presents the latest progress. A real estate agent will review the apartment's records from the past 6 months. Unfortunately, since no one has been living there, there are no phone records or internet connections to trace. The owner had the unit repainted 2 years ago, just before the pandemic, so the team plans to contact the painting company and identify the workers who handled the job. Krupp then explains that another division, led by Frank, has already deployed an anti-terrorism team to assist with the case. Jeffrey immediately rejects the move. He insists that all decisions run through him, and he remains convinced that this is not an act of terrorism. Next, Marquand shares his findings. The explosion inside the apartment was caused by an M14 grenade. His team also noticed scratch marks beneath the keyhole of the unit's door. That detail suggests the suspect had multiple keys to different units in the building. It looks like he had to test several keys before finding the right one, and the extra keys scraped the metal around the lock. Even more concerning is the weapon used in the shootings. The sniper rifle is an old XM-21, a model used by the U.S. military in the 1970s. Tracking down how the suspect obtained such a weapon will not be easy. Jack adds that outdated military weapons are sometimes transferred to local law enforcement, sent to war zones, or dismantled altogether. Hearing this, Eleanor suggests they investigate the Army division responsible for dismantling those rifles. If there was any irregularity in that process, it might finally lead them to the person behind the massacre. After the meeting, Eleanor asks Jack why Jeffrey is so reluctant to involve other divisions. Jack explains that in Jeffrey's experience, investigations often fall apart when too many departments interfere. Later, the three of them visit the morgue. They search for any connection between the victims, but find none. The targets were not from a specific race, not tied to gangs, politics, terrorism, or international conflict. The killings were completely random, and the precision is terrifying. Every victim was taken down with a single shot. Jeffrey becomes more certain than ever that they are dealing with someone highly trained in long-range shooting. Whether he comes from the military or was a professional marksman, one thing is clear: this is not an amateur. Standing in the morgue, surrounded by the victims, Eleanor begins to question something unexpected. In her view, maybe the killer did not plan this as carefully as everyone assumes. But Jeffrey and Jack strongly disagree. No one carries around a vintage sniper rifle like the XM-21 without planning something in advance. Not long after, a police officer rushes in with news that they have found the suspect and are about to make an arrest. At the scene, the operation is being led by Frank. During the investigation, a teenage boy named Mark suddenly starts triggering alarms throughout the building. When officers try to question him, he locks himself inside his room and threatens to harm everyone. According to Frank and his team, Mark fits the profile. He has ADHD, skips school because he is bullied, watches extremist videos online, and was recently introduced to a gun community by his uncle. To them, it looks suspicious enough, but Jeffrey is not convinced. None of that proves Mark owns, or even has access to, an old military sniper rifle like the XM-21. Frank ignores the objections and orders his team to storm the room. Shocked and terrified, Mark makes a desperate decision. He jumps out of his apartment window. Jeffrey is furious. Still, Frank and his colleague Jesse insist that Mark's panic proves his guilt. Jeffrey argues that any teenager would panic if their house were surrounded by police and the news had already labeled them a mass murderer. And more importantly, becoming a sniper of that caliber requires professional military-level training, not just playing video games. The following day, Jeffrey, Jack, and Eleanor shift their focus. They interrogate three painters who worked on the 17th floor unit at Redwood Apartments 2 years earlier, the same unit used in the Baltimore massacre. One of them is Rodney Lang. Among the three, Rodney stands out. He brings his infant child to the police station, claiming his wife is at work. All three painters have alibis for the night of the shooting and no obvious connections to each other. Rodney admits he painted the bedroom of that apartment and also reveals that he works for 2 separate painting companies. After the interrogation, Eleanor gets reprimanded by Jeffrey for opening a confidential FBI intelligence file without permission. From that file, she discovered something unusual. Lab results from the apartment's toilet waste suggest the suspect does not consume meat. In other words, the killer may be a vegetarian. Later that evening, Jeffrey invites Eleanor to dinner along with a friend. Once the friend leaves, the tone shifts. Jeffrey tells her he looked into her background and learned that she failed to enter the FBI 8 years earlier. Her psychological evaluation described her as aggressive, addictive, and antisocial. It also noted that she had used drugs as a coping mechanism. According to the report, she experienced a traumatic event at the age of 12. Jeffrey asked why she chose a career in law enforcement. Eleanor admits she was searching for protection from herself. Overwhelmed, she reveals scars on her arm, signs that she has been harming herself during moments of anxiety and depression. Jeffrey tries to calm her. He explains that he is not bringing up her past to judge her. Instead, he believes her struggles give her a rare insight into the minds of criminals, especially someone like the Baltimore shooter. Most offenders project their anger outward onto others. Eleanor, despite her instability, turns that anger inward. A few days later, chaos strikes again. At a shopping mall in Baltimore, a mysterious man, later referred to as Adam, starts behaving strangely. He takes someone else's clothes while they are changing. He is reported to security for washing himself in a sink and for picking through leftover food, eating only vegetables in front of everyone. Two security guards approach him to check his bag. Without warning, Adam opens fire.
Open the bag. Open the bag. Fuck.
While the team is still trying to trace where he obtained the XM-21 rifle, Eleanor receives devastating news. A brutal shooting has just occurred at the mall. This time, not only civilians are killed, but also police officers and even members of the SWAT team. Adam keeps his head down the entire time and wears a hoodie, making it impossible for cameras to capture his face. He leaves no fingerprints behind. However, CCTV footage does show him discarding his shirt in a restroom trash bin. Jack immediately retrieves it, knowing that DNA from the clothing could finally reveal Adam's real identity. As Eleanor watches the footage, she interprets it differently. In her eyes, Adam did not go to the mall looking for chaos. He went there to wash up, change clothes, and find food. The fact that he only took vegetables reinforces her belief that he is a vegan, just like the person who used the apartment earlier. Jeffrey and Eleanor are stunned by how calm Adam appears during the attack. He moves with precision, shoots without hesitation, and even manages to take down SWAT officers by carefully setting grenade traps at the right moment. He is cold, disciplined, and clearly well-trained. But there is a problem. The trash from the scene, including Adam's shirt, has already been collected by janitors. Jeffrey immediately sends Eleanor and Jack to intercept the garbage truck. They have no choice but to search for the shirt at the dump site. Jeffrey begins to panic, worried that losing this evidence could cost him his job. Before they leave, Eleanor quietly reminds him to take his medication and not let his anxiety spiral out of control. At the Baltimore landfill, with the help of sanitation workers, they dig through piles of garbage. After a tense search, they finally recover Adam's shirt. Meanwhile, Jeffrey faces growing pressure from other officials, including Jesse, who questioned his competence in handling the Baltimore case. Under orders from his superiors, Jeffrey releases censored CCTV footage of the mall shooting to a television program, hoping that someone in the public might recognize Adam and call in a tip. Further analysis of the footage reveals another troubling detail. Adam is not using the old XM-21 this time. Instead, he carries another outdated weapon, a submachine gun known as the HDM. Marquand provides a list of hundreds of legal owners of vintage firearms registered over the past year. Most of them are retired members of the armed forces. Now Jeffrey and his team face the overwhelming task of checking each name one by one, trying to find a connection to the Baltimore case. It is going to be slow and incredibly difficult. Eleanor points out that even if a retired soldier legally owned one of these weapons, it could have been passed down to a family member. Krupp adds another detail. Adam was wearing work boots, and forensic analysis found sawdust, wood splinters, and traces of paint on them. The mention of paint immediately brings the team back to one place, the painters who worked on the Redwood apartment before the explosion. Eleanor begins to suspect Rodney. He was the only painter who brought his baby to the interrogation, something she now believes may have been a distraction tactic. Not long after, lab results from Adam's recovered shirt come in. Hair fragments and skin particles suggest he suffered severe head trauma in the past. Not long after the footage airs on television, a suspicious caller phones into the broadcast. He goes on a rant about the American government and even threatens the host. Police quickly trace the call to a man named David, who is linked to a rival gun community and an anti-government group. Jeffrey, Jack, Eleanor, and the rest of the team head to David's last known location in the city of Somerset. On the way there, Eleanor tells Jeffrey that Adam does not fit the profile of someone who joins communities or organized groups. In her view, Adam is a loner. As she continues sharing her thoughts, Jeffrey snaps at her and tells her to follow orders. He reminds her that he also has to carry out instructions from people above him, whether he agrees with them or not. When they arrive at a Walmart, they find David and three of his friends casually shopping for snacks. Marquand, Eleanor, and Jack enter the store pretending to be customers. Quietly and carefully, they begin signaling other shoppers and even the cashier to leave the area calmly. But one elderly man does not understand what Eleanor is trying to communicate, and that hesitation makes David and his friends suspicious. Within moments, Marquand and Jack draw their weapons and a shooting breaks out. In the end, it turns out David and his friends were not connected to the Baltimore massacre at all. The phone call was nothing more than a prank for attention. They were not serious members of any extremist group, just pretending to discuss heavy topics for the sake of sensation. The consequences, however, are devastating. 30 minutes after the show ends, two teenagers carry out a shooting of their own, killing 2 people and injuring 3 others before taking their own lives. A Molotov cocktail is also thrown at a Jewish place of worship in Boston. Now the spotlight turns back to Jeffrey. He is accused of incompetence for releasing the mall footage to television, for triggering public panic, and for relying on advice from Eleanor, the officer who was previously rejected by the FBI. On top of that, the true identity of the Baltimore shooter is still unknown. Jeffrey explains that he chose Eleanor because she is honest, proactive, and analytically sharp. She was the only officer brave enough to step into the Redwood apartment crime scene to look for answers. But despite his defense, Jeffrey is eventually removed from his position. The fallout hits Eleanor hard. She spirals into depression and begins thinking about returning to drugs and self-harm. One night, while showering, she notices peeling paint on her bathroom ceiling. That small detail suddenly reminds her of Rodney. That same night, she goes to Rodney's house and confronts him. She questions how he managed to handle painting jobs in 2 places at the same time. It raises the possibility that he may have given a key to the Redwood apartment to someone else to finish the work for him. Rodney finally agrees to tell the truth, and Eleanor immediately calls Jeffrey to join her. Rodney admits that he has been able to take on multiple projects because he hires workers illegally to complete the tasks. In other words, he outsources the jobs. He then reveals that one of those workers stood out. His name is Dean. Dean was extremely meticulous, very private, and did not eat meat at all. He used to work at a slaughterhouse in the southern United States, an experience that made him reject meat entirely. He often wore a hat and had a phone number that had been inactive for months. Not long after, Jeffrey contacts a forensic sketch artist. Using Rodney's description, they put together an approximate image of Dean's face. With that sketch in hand, Jeffrey and Eleanor travel to 3 slaughterhouses in the southern United States, asking workers if they recognize the man in the drawing. At one of the facilities, they finally meet a longtime employee who confirms that he knows Dean. The worker reveals that back in 1998, Dean was involved in the murder of his supervisor. According to him, Dean had been constantly bullied at work because of the unusual shape of his head. The harassment escalated, and eventually it turned deadly. Following that lead, Jeffrey and Eleanor head toward Dean's last known residence. Eleanor uncovers more details about his past. Dean served 2 years in prison for the killing, but was released early after 2 Army officials, close friends of his father, recommended leniency. His father had been a shooting instructor in the military. He legally owned several old firearms, which remained in his possession until his death in 2003. Prison records describe Dean as awkward and withdrawn, with a perpetually gloomy expression. He suffered severe head trauma from gunshot wounds when he was younger, which left him highly sensitive to light and sound. He struggled with insomnia and social interaction. He had no credit card, no registered address, and no official identification card, making him extremely difficult to track. When Jeffrey and Eleanor arrive near the property, Jeffrey tells her not to call Jack. He fears that if the FBI gets involved too soon, they might storm the place and scare Dean into running. Soon after, a woman pulls up and honks her car horn. It is Dean's mother, Irene. The moment she sees Jeffrey's license plate, she understands why they are there. Still, she claims she has not seen her son in a long time. Jeffrey makes it clear that he wants to capture Dean alive. Hearing that, Irene allows both Jeffrey and Eleanor to enter her home. She explains that the last time she saw her son was during the pandemic, when everyone was isolating indoors. Dean had a habit of wandering off on his own, sometimes living in forests or abandoned houses. Eleanor asks about the gunshot wounds to Dean's head. Irene admits that her late husband accidentally shot Dean twice when he was a child. Miraculously, he survived, but he remained in a coma for nearly a year. When he finally woke up, he was no longer the same. Dean began to hate crowds and noise. He was bullied by other children. In response, his father taught him how to shoot, supposedly so he could defend himself. At one point, Dean was encouraged to join the army, but he failed to get in because of his unusual personality. The once gentle boy gradually became isolated and withdrawn. Over time, he developed a deep resentment toward the world around him. While standing outside, Eleanor notices something unsettling. On the back patio table, there are 2 cups. Nearby, a pair of men's boxers hang out to dry. Then her eyes drift toward a small structure not far from the house. Its window faces directly toward where she and Jeffrey are standing. Suddenly, a gunshot rings out. The bullet is aimed directly at Eleanor and the others.
No, don't! He'll shoot you!
Dean has been there the entire time. The horn Irene used earlier was not random. It was a warning to her son. In an instant, Jeffrey is killed when he reaches for his weapon. In the middle of the chaos, Irene begs Eleanor to save Dean, no matter what it takes. Trying to stabilize the situation, Eleanor tells Irene to take Jeffrey's gun and phone from his pocket, along with her own, to prevent further escalation. Irene then calls out to her son, urging him to come out calmly. She approaches the small house and tries to convince him that Eleanor can help him avoid harsh punishment, especially given his mental condition. But Dean does not respond. Exhausted by years of guilt and heartbreak and unable to bear what her son has become, Irene makes a devastating decision.
Come with me!
Slowly, Dean steps out and approaches Eleanor. He is tall, imposing, and emotionally distant. Eleanor tells him that the FBI sent her because they believed her psychological struggles would help her understand him. She admits that she is not afraid of dying. She has spent years battling self-hatred, even contemplating ending her own life. Dean explains his hatred for the noise and celebration of New Year's Eve. To him, it feels like people are rejecting silence and darkness. He despises the rules of society, especially the idea that humans must work to buy things with money. In his mind, it makes no sense for people to claim ownership over anything on Earth, because at the end of the day, humans truly own nothing. Now feeling strangely satisfied but completely drained, Dean says he wants to hug his mother one last time and fall asleep beside her. He asks Eleanor to shoot him in the head and burn both of their bodies, and only after that call the police. Before anything can happen, sirens are heard in the distance. Eleanor did not call for backup. Neighbors must have reported the earlier gunshots, but Dean assumes Eleanor betrayed him. He knocks her unconscious.
No, Dean.
When she wakes up, she is tied up in a hidden basement. From inside the house, Dean shoots a responding officer through a window. Another officer manages to reach his car and radio for help, but he too is shot. Soon, more police units surround the area. Dean begins assembling a bomb, determined to destroy everyone outside. Even while restrained, Eleanor pleads with him to stop. She tells him he is acting as if his pain matters more than the lives of the officers out there, people who have families waiting for them. She reminds him that he asked her to kill him earlier, which means he is already tired of living. Blowing up more people will not erase his hatred. It will not make him feel better. Dean stands silently in front of her. In a desperate move, Eleanor lunges at him and bites him. In the struggle, Dean leaves the basement, taking his XM-21 sniper rifle with him. Eleanor manages to free herself and escape outside, where Jack finally reaches her. Wounded and exhausted, Dean stumbles through the darkness toward an abandoned building. Police track his footsteps and find him sitting alone, drained of energy. Moments later, he is shot and killed. After everything that happened, Eleanor is offered a permanent position at the FBI as an intelligence analyst. In the aftermath, the entire operation surrounding Dean's capture is sealed from the public. Officially, the people are told only that the Baltimore massacre and the mall shooting have been solved. What happened at Dean's house remains classified. Even Eleanor's old FBI records, including her past drug use, are erased. At first, Eleanor refuses the offer placed in front of her. It feels like a bribe, a way to keep her quiet. After all, she and Jeffrey were repeatedly undermined during the investigation. They were fed misleading leads that derailed the case. Frank pushed the theory about Mark, the teenager who turned out to be innocent. Jeffrey was pressured by his superiors to release the mall footage to television, a move that triggered further violence and ultimately cost him his job. Now Jesse reminds Eleanor that she also crossed a line. She continued investigating the Baltimore case even after Jeffrey was removed. From the Bureau's perspective, that is a violation. So the FBI proposes what they call a practical solution. The mass murder case will be officially closed, and Eleanor will receive a position as an analyst. In the end, she accepts, but not without conditions. She demands to be appointed as a special FBI agent. Jeffrey must be awarded a Medal of Honor, and his full salary through retirement must be paid to his family. A few days later, Eleanor begins her new role as a special agent. As she steps into this new chapter, she remembers Jeffrey's advice. Do the job. Enforce the law. Do not get lost in what happens to the accused after the arrest. Everyone has their own portion to carry. Eleanor still holds tightly to her sense of truth and justice, but she now understands that working within the system means following policies that may not always align with her personal principles. And that may be the hardest battle she will ever face. So the moral of the story is if you hate fireworks in society that much, maybe try noise-canceling headphones instead of vintage sniper rifles.